Equalization basics. So now we've worked on our compression, we've used a handful of techniques and done a lot of great stuff to get the dynamics in check in our mix, and now we got to move on to equalization. So equalization is adjusting the level of different frequencies on a track. So we have control over the highs, the mids, and the lows, and we can add gain or take away gain from individual parts of the sound. So there's a handful of things to review here with this, and what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and solo our piano track here in our gospel choir mix, and we're going to go to an EQ plugin, and we're going to use Pro Tools as a standard EQ3 7-band, and this is a great, nice functional plugin. And basically what we have here is we have a grid that you see on basically all plugins nowadays, and what it shows us is from left to right we have our low frequencies to our high, and the range of human hearing is basically generally from 20 hertz or 20 cycles per second to 20,000 hertz or 20 kilohertz or 20,000 cycles per second. So that's how many vibrations are occurring per second. So lower frequencies have less vibrations per second and higher frequencies have more. So basically in that range we have different control over the volume of different frequencies. And what this is a fully parametric EQ, which means that we have control over not only the volume up or down of a band, we also have control over what frequency we're adjusting, and finally we have control over what's called the Q, which is the width of the affected area. And so as you can see, as I raise the Q it gets more narrow, and as I lower the Q it gets wider. Okay, so we talk about some of this stuff more in depth in audio recording and production if you want to jump back and look at that, but we just want to review some of the basics so we can get ready to EQ our mix. So in addition to our regular peak dip EQs like I'm using here, we also have shelves. So here's a low shelf that takes everything lower than the frequency that we're adjusting and raises it to that level, and then we also have a high shelf that does the same thing, and then finally we have what's called a low pass and high pass filter. And so here is our high pass filter. If we bring that in, we'll turn off our shelf there. If we bring that in, you can see that it's basically letting everything higher than this frequency pass, and therefore it's called a high pass filter or a low cut filter. That's the same thing, low cut and high pass. And then on the other side we have a low pass filter or a high cut. Okay, and it just does the opposite, so everything higher than the frequency is cut off, and we have control of how steep that cut is and such. Okay, so those are our basic controls that we have on our EQ plugins, and like I said, this plugin is pretty functional with 7 bands to work with. So you've got your your high pass and your low pass, and then we have 5 bands to work with, and the furthest bands, with the red one and the blue one, are changeable between a peak dip EQ like this or the shelf, and so we can narrow our effect with those, or we can make it just shelf everything higher than that frequency or everything lower than that frequency in the case of the low shelf. Okay, so now that we can see kind of what our controls are, we can remind ourselves kind of the sound of EQ. So as you can see, we can take the low frequencies out. You can go here with the mid-range, and you can hear as I go to different frequencies the different timbre changes. And that's something to kind of train your ear and get familiar with what it sounds like when you boost certain frequencies. So this right here is 219 hertz, and so we can get an idea what that does to the sound when we boost 219 hertz or we pull it down. Okay? So it's kind of nice to just kind of play with EQ a little bit and get an idea of what those sounds are that you're making adjustments with. So see what happens when we pull out certain frequencies and boost certain frequencies. And we're going to be doing a lot of both, adding and taking away different frequencies. Now, the thing we want to remember, and we're going to go over these things in the next few videos, is that there's three main purposes of EQ. One purpose is to make things sound better. So I'd go in here and I would try to make the piano sound better, maybe bring out some high frequencies, maybe bring out some low and make it sound really thick and beautiful. Okay? And a lot of times that's great to use that. But the second purpose is as an effect. So maybe I want to make the piano sound like it's being played through a telephone or a bad speaker or something like that. I can use EQ to accomplish some of those things. And the third purpose of EQ is to balance our frequencies. So we've talked about the Fletcher-Munson curve and how we hear and how frequencies mask each other. And basically our EQ is used to kind of make everything fit together so they're not masking each other and so that everything is living together. And that's really our three purposes of EQ, and you'll see how the next handful of videos follow one of those three purposes of EQ all the way through. And that's equalization basics.